So far, we've been able to filter out and do some fancy calculation within our queries, but what we haven't been able to do as yet is any summarizing. Every time we view the data, we see all 18,000 records unless we filter those records down. But we can actually, in Access with queries, summarize, so we can add up and group by whatever criteria we feel fit. So let's take our customers table in a new query and have a look at how we might do this. So in our customers table, if we were to investigate the country region name and the total purchased YTD and view, we would see all the countries and all the total purchase YTD for each individual. So we see 18,508 rows. But what we might want to see is a total of all the purchase YTD by country. So we would only want to see the country ones. So for example, I'd want to see Australia ones and a grand total here of the total purchased. In order to do that, I need to do some grouping. So in design, if I want to add in grouping, I come up to the Query Tools Design ribbon and click Totals. Now that on its own does nothing but introduce a new row in the query grid at the bottom here. We now have a new total row that allows us to group by the fields that we've chosen. So I would like to group by the country region name, but I don't want to group by the amount. What I want to do to the amount is add that up. Well, in the group by box, there is a drop down arrow of available functions. So I can actually sum, so I can add up all the total purchases broken down by region name, or I could average them, or I could min, so find the smallest, or max, find the largest, or I could just count them, count the number of purchases. And then there is standard deviation, variance, first, last, expression, and where. So we might use a where if we were trying to add a criteria, but not group by a particular field. We'll see how that works a bit later. For the moment, let's go with sum. So I want to add up the total purchase YTD, but group it by the country region name. Then when I view, I see what I wanted in the first place, which is each country once, but then with a grand total of the purchases made. I can even sort this data by the total of the grand purchases made by going back to design and choosing sort descending perhaps on our sum field. So view, I then see the country at the top that has bought the most from us and the country at the bottom that has bought the least in terms of financial value. Very useful query, worth saving. Total purchases by country. Okay, now you can group by any field in your data that it would make sense to group by. Or you can actually group by any field. If I go down here, I can change the field to any other field, but it would have to make sense in the end result. Perhaps we would do it by occupation. View. And then we see the total purchases by occupation of our customers. And the professional have bought the most. Or maybe we would like to group by education. And we see at what stage people's education got to has effect on the total purchases. If we try to choose a field that has too many options, for example, the surname option, last name, then we'll see a lot of rows, and that just summarizes by the person's surname. So there's too many rows there and not a logical choice. So it does matter which fields you choose, perhaps marital status. Married and single, $1 million difference between them. So that's choose the field you wish to group on. Let's go back to our country region. Then choose the field you wish to carry some mathematical function out on. You can carry out more than one function at once, as long as it's on the same grouping. So I could ask for total purchase YTD again and change that to average. Perhaps ask for it again and change it to min. Ask for it again and change it to max. So we're actually only using two fields, but one of them 4 times, but asking it to do a different calculation each time. And I go to view, I see then the United States, their total purchases, their average purchases, which are actually lower than the Australian average, even though the total is higher, smallest purchase and their largest purchase. We ought to really add in as well. Let's add the same field and do a count. So it actually counts how many purchases. And then view, Therefore, we can see there are a lot more sales to the United States, but their lowest value is very low, and their average is much lower than all of the others. So that's a grouping. Turn on the totals row here. Choose which field or fields, if you wish to group by 2 fields, you wish to group on, and then which of the fields you wish to carry out any calculations on. Those calculations being chosen from the list in the drop-down. You cannot add your own functions in there. You can only sum, average, min, max, count, standard deviation, variance, first, last, an expression if we're using that calculation slightly differently, and then where if we're adding a where clause. Now the where might work if we wanted to, for example, add in another field to affect the result. So at the moment, we're looking at the country region name, but if we were to involve the gender, for example, now I don't want to group by the gender, but I don't want to do any calculation on it either. I just want the gender to have an effect on the result. So if I choose where, you notice the little tick from show goes, and I can put a criteria in of M. M for male. And when I view, gender field with its where clause has an effect on the result, but I don't see it anywhere in my result. But because it's involved in the where clause, all of these people that feed into this information are just male customers. So you can see that the numbers have dropped, apart from the average, which has pretty much stayed the same. So that's where the where clause would come in, when you want one of the other fields not used in the grouping to have an effect on the result, to filter out the result.